Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Armchair Travel event. It's lovely to see so many of you joining us this evening. I wonder if you've been experiencing the weird and wonderful weather that we've been having here in Cambridge. 1 minute it's raining, 1 minute it's sunny, 1 minute it's hailing. So this event is in collaboration with Distant Horizons. As if many of you know, if you've been to a previous Armchair Travel event, we've been working with them for over 25 years. This evening, I'm delighted to introduce and welcome guest speaker Dr. Nirvana Romell, a stalwart of the Alumni Travel Programme, and many of you may have already travelled with her. Just to remind you, if you'd like to answer any questions during this evening's event, you can do so via the chat or the Q&A function found at the bottom of the Zoom window. I'd now like to hand over to Daniel from Distant Horizons.
Thank you very much, Claire. Yes, my name is Daniel Moore. I help manage the cultural travel company Distant Horizons. We specialize in scholar-accompanied journeys to most parts of Asia, the Middle East, Central Asia, North Africa, and Europe. We try and focus on some of the lesser visited destinations in those regions, and we try and offer special experiences that allow the traveler to really get under the skin of a country that they're traveling in. This might be briefings from local academics, historians, politicians. It might be meals in private homes, food and wine tasting, visits to private art collections. And sometimes where we can, we try and even organize visits with local alumni who are living in those countries. We've been working with Cambridge University now for over 25 years. And in that time, we've probably organized over 250, 300 journeys for the alumni, and maybe taken over 3,000 alumni and their friends and family of alumni. And the program seems to go from strength to strength. A couple of housekeeping points, as Claire has mentioned. We definitely encourage questions, so please do ask these. But if you could use your Q&A or chat box, I will try and collate those questions and put those questions to Nirvana at the end of the talk. If I may, a very brief, a couple of minutes advertisement on the Cambridge Alumni Travel Programme and a few trips they're organising. Professor Charles Melville will accompany a party to Central Asia in this spring, and that will take in some of the great medieval and fabled cities of Bukhara, Samarkand, Khiva, which for many contain some of the greatest art and architecture in the Islamic world. In June, Dr. Alex Koller will accompany probably his third or fourth visit to Romania. And this particular journey involves 6 or 7 days of lightish walking in the beautiful and spectacularly beautiful Carpathian Mountains in Transylvania, in northeast Romania, which are, for many, are probably one of Romania's one of Europe's great last remaining wildernesses. And not just a great cult of scenic beauty, but also of cultural variety, dotted with fantastic, beautiful churches, wooden painted churches and monasteries and cultural traditions, food and costume. In January of next year, Miranda Bruce Mitford will accompany a second journey to Vietnam and Cambodia in Southeast Asia, and a chance to explore the distinct but fascinating cultures of both countries, and also which also share spectacular landscapes and a wonderful cuisine. And also, again, for many, home to some of Asia's greatest art and or historical art and architecture, particularly in places like Angkor Wat. And in fact, this year's journey, which only came back about 6 or 7 weeks ago, we managed to organize a wonderful, and I believe it was a fascinating dinner in Saigon with 30 alumni from the city, Ho Chi Minh City or Saigon. In October, Zara Fleming will organize probably, I think, her 5th or 6th journey to the Himalayas, and this trip for the alumni, and this trip will focus on Bhutan, and particularly the sort of lesser visited eastern region of the country, and will take in a fabulous and very colorful festival in Bumtang Valley in eastern Bhutan. And then finally, Nirvana Romell, who will be talking today about Turin. She accompanies a party to northwestern Italy, to the beautiful Piedmont region. And in that itinerary, there's 5 or 6 days incorporated in the vibrant city of Turin, which, as I'm sure Nirvana will tell us, is a marvelous blend of great historical legacy around the royal House of Savoy, but also today a very vibrant and contemporary atmosphere. If any of those trips look of interest, then by all means, please do contact us. There's our website, there's our email address, and we would be very happy to send you a full in-depth itinerary, probably about 7 or 8 pages with full details of sightseeing, meals, flights, etc. But anyway, enough of the advertisement. And if I can now hand over to Nirvana to tell us more about the elegant and industrial city of Turin. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm not quite sure I can just see your screen, so
Yeah, no, I can't stop sharing it, is it? Can you?
It's already gone, Nirvana, so you can start sharing.
okay.
Okay, you can, yeah.
Yep. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Some of you might know me. I am Croatian by birth. So actually the Balkans are my natural playground. However, for the past 20 years, it's been my great passion to research forgotten European powers and also then to link them to our present day. Because, you know, with the fall of Yugoslavia, I witnessed firsthand the demise of one power. And we certainly live in interesting times where powers are fighting amongst themselves, and one are on the wane and other ones are rising and so on. So I'm just fascinated by the parts of European history that have been, for one reason or another, excluded from the generally known narrative, and especially the states and rulers that in their time controlled the overall balance of powers on our continent, but now hardly anybody knows about them. So along this line, I have also developed tours for the distant horizons that trace these overlooked bits of history, such as the Patriarchy of Aquileia or Duchy of Burgundy. And then this year in September, we are going to Turin and the Aosta Valley, so that we can see what the Savoys have done for our Western culture. Now, if I mention the Savoy dynasty, most of people don't know where or when to place them within European map or history. And if I mention Turin, most common associations tend to be Fiat, Michael Caine, and the Italian job. Yet the Savoys were an instrumental part of the European history for a millennium, longer than any other European dynasty. And Turin was their grand capital for 3 centuries, and all aspects of its existence, even today, have been shaped by them. So today, I would like to first introduce you to the Savoys, highlight some of my favorite bits of Turin, and connect how the legacy of the Savoys and the Turin. Now, for that, I will need to start sharing my screen. And first and foremost, we will start by asking the question, who are the Savoys? There is a 15th century written history of the Savoy family commissioned by them, where the founding of the dynasty is attributed to one Berold of Saxony, who was supposedly the nephew of the Holy Roman Emperor Otto III. Now, there is absolutely no real proof of this, but it already suggests that the Savoys had certain ambitions, because, you know, if you were a German prince rather than a French or Italian one, you could participate in imperial diets and potentially even be elected Holy Roman Emperor. Now, in the 19th century, Berold and this myth of Germanic origin was quietly forgotten. You know, like the Saxe, Coburg, and Gotha. Nobody talks about them these days. And somewhat more documented, Humbert the White Hand was pushed forward as the founder of the Savoy dynasty. Mercifully, we do know a few bits more Humbert. There are records. So we know that the family was already well established and Belay in the 11th century. The town is marked by the red cross on this map, so you can see it there in the proximity to Lyon, Geneva, Annecy, and Chambéry. So this means that the family was most likely Burgundian, which explains their inherent hatred of the French, and they were not Germans. And then also, while they might have come from there, we know that they moved to Chambéry in about the 13th century and stayed there until their move to Turin. Now, as the Holy Roman Empire was being pulled apart between the Ottonian dynasty and the Salian pretenders in the 11th century, this Humbert White Hand had the wisdom to back the winning faction, Conrad the Salic, and in return for his support, he was made the Count of Savoy and the Count of Aosta. This meant that he was awarded lands which effectively gave the Savoys the control of the 3 alpine passes that you can see now here. So down from the south, we have Susa or Mount Cenis near Turin. Then we have Saint Bernard over Mont Blanc and Simplon Pass from the Lake Maggiore into Switzerland and the plains. Now, consider that these 3 passes today generate annually approximately 250 million euros in income. You can just imagine what riches they brought to the medieval Savoys. So thus the dynasty was born. Soon most of the lands of the Piedmont were acquired through shrewd marriages, and these fertile green plains also contributed greatly to the growing wealth of the Savoys. It is really important to mention that throughout their history, the Savoys were one of the best matchmakers in Europe, placing their sisters and daughters strategically to increase their own status, of course. The Savoy women were married to emperors, to kings, to princes. They were renowned for their education and intelligence, so very often they ruled as regents. And throughout this history, you can actually see that they were marrying very strategically to the powers that were rising. So in up to about 16th century, they're trying with the French and so on. But as the Germany slightly increases its powers and is moving towards unification, there is move to the north and to the German princes and kings and so on. Here I'm just showing randomly 3 of them. You have Anna of Savoy, who was a Byzantine empress in the 14th century. Then you have Charlotte of Savoy, who was a 15th century queen of France. And then you have Maria Pia, a beloved queen of Portugal in the 19th century. But the Savoys didn't just marry well. They had an amazing talent for diplomacy and for choosing and supporting the winning sides in various European conflicts. With their matchmaking, they even reached England in the 13th century when Eleanor of Provence, the niece of this gentleman here, Peter II, Count of Savoy, married Henry III. And the Count then joined her at the court and was awarded lands and castles for his services, including the patch between the Strand and the Thames in London, where he built his Savoy Palace. And this is where the Savoy Hotel and the Savoy Chapel are today. Peter also played actually an important role in constitutional reforms in England, but we don't have time to cover all of the Savoy history. But I just wanted to mention these things because I hope you can get the idea that they were not just some medieval provincial nobility. They really mattered. So now I'm going to skip a few centuries and lead you straight to Turin. It was this brave soldier, Emanuele Filiberto, Duke of Savoy, that decided to move the Savoy capital from Chambéry to Turin in 1563. By that point, the Savoys were elevated to dukes, which happened in 15th century. Now, this particular area, particular period in the 16th century was the era of the so-called Italian wars, which were fought between the French kings and the Spanish Habsburgs. Turin and most of the Piedmont were occupied and devastated by the French troops. And the Savoys were fighting on the side of the Habsburgs, which meant that they were the enemy of the France. And actually, this was just an ongoing thing. There is actually not a century in their history in which Savoys did not fight the French at one place or another. Now, Emanuele Filiberto led the Spanish troops and distinguished himself throughout this period as a great military leader. That's how he got the nickname the Iron Head, because he always had his armor on and helmet on, and he was always launching himself into some battles. And throughout this campaign, he managed to win or negotiate back all the Savoy lands that the French took. He also displayed this youthful ambition. So he was trying his chances. He was actually wooing Elizabeth I of England. Then he was contending the Portuguese throne. But then all of that really failed. And then he decided to move his capital from Chambéry to Turin. And it was actually this move and the orthodox ruling methods that would prove to be the stroke of genius and sort of trigger of this culture of the Savoys and raise the Turin to its royal existence. Like the kings of Spain and France and Holy Roman emperors with whom he shared friendships and battlefields, he was intent on greatness, but he was also aware that the Savoys were not really in that league of absolute monarchs where people will worship them because they believed that they were God-given. He knew that he needed the people to really believe in the Savoys in order for them to succeed. Not just the upper echelons of the society, but all the people of their realm. So with the move, Filiberto sort of turned a fresh page and he designed new laws which were very egalitarian and quite unique for that period of Europe. They all applied equally to all of his subjects, regardless of their social status, which was not the case because the nobility was usually judged differently from the rest. He allowed for the language differences between the French Savoy and the Italian Piedmont, declaring both languages equal and official. He believed in meritocracy, and he surrounded himself with a learned, capable people, regardless of their origin. Of course, we're not, we have to think about this within the framework of its time, but it was an interesting court, certainly, where you didn't belong just because you were born blue-blooded, but you could also belong because you were very useful to the state. And then this, in turn, of course, inspired both the nobility and the commoners to apply themselves as best they could, with the grasp of the connection between the common good and the personal gain. Also, understanding the difficult geopolitical position of Piedmont, he created a standing army and a great war industry to support it. And this is very, very important fact, and we'll get back to this soldiering later. The Savoy encouraged their subjects to understand that every segment of the society was dependent on others for survival, regardless of hierarchy. And the brilliant example of this thinking is the charitable banking foundation of St. Paul, which was founded in 1563 by a committee of 7 encouraged by the Savoys. Following the French occupation in mid-century, Piedmont, Turin, and its population were in a very, very poor state. Everyone was hurting, from the nobles to the poorest. So in order to kickstart a bit of a renewal, this foundation raised money to lend it to the nobles so they can employ artisans to fix their ruined palaces and artists to decorate them again. And then these small businesses also got loans to help them to get going again. So even today, many people don't understand the social and economic value of the arts. And as you can see, they had it all sussed out 450 years ago. So I'm using these examples because I really want to show you how special they were in their thinking, how different from the rest of the ruling Europe, and how within, again, of scopes of their time, avant-garde and almost left-leaning. Incidentally, the foundation is still going stronger, and it's operating only in the historic Savoy territories in Italy, and I think it's holding some 8 billion euros in assets, so a very healthy thing indeed. If I have to say that the Savoys had one serious fault, that was the religious intolerance, especially towards the Protestants, less so towards the Jewish population, but Reformation, they really did not allow for it. So all of these reforms and activities were happening at the same time when Turin was being turned into one of the greatest building sites of Europe. They rebuilt the city, which was almost destroyed by the 25 years of French occupation. And they just used the Roman grid, which is here in the red, and on which the medieval part of the town was built. They just extended it south and west towards the River Po. And they built these mighty fortifications and a citadel, which then unfortunately the descendants tore down. So there's only some traces that still remain from these. But they also at this time founded the University of Turin and the College of the Nobles, and both of these institutions are still going strong. Again, the fact that the noble sons were provided with an urge to attend the Jesuit-run high school tells you how avant-garde the Savoys were, because elsewhere the nobility just basically schooled their own children privately, and there was not a huge stress on education that was put in those echelons of the society. But it was really the 17th century that Turin was turned in the grand capital that we can still see today. And when all of these buildings I'm listing here were built, and these are the buildings that we will be going to visit, and they're all part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, as much as of our September itinerary. Now, before I start showing you some of these grand monuments, I thought that I do need to address the elephant in the room, and that is a Baroque, which is a style that I found in my 20 odd years working with the British, that it's not close to the British heart. However, it is a defining style of this supremely elegant city. So please humor me for a few minutes of sidetracking while I speak in a defense of Baroque, because I hope that you might appreciate Turin more if you can understand the ways in which Baroque differs from the almost universally beloved Renaissance. Now, when you look at the Renaissance, whether it's architecture or sculpture or poetry or painting or whatever it might be, the expectations from the artists were completely different than the ones that we find in later styles or any other styles. So in the Renaissance, artists and architects were expected to illustrate the ideas from literary sources. Sorry. Well, being Bible, classics, contemporary poetry. And for that, they were using a well-known and relatively simple iconography, and they were meant to show all of the details of God's creation in universal light and time, like a standard encyclopedia. In a complete contrast, the Baroque artists were expected to produce concettismo, meraviglia e spettacolo. Their imagination had to create unique visions. That's what concettismo is. And it might be inspired perhaps by the same sources as their Renaissance predecessors, but they were supposed to conjure original concepts and get their audience to gasp, to marvel at their work, rather than just read standardized visual clues. So Baroque art is very interactive. It is not frozen in time. It is all about this moment. It's the spectacle of current moment experienced by you as a viewer, whether by climbing the monumental staircases or walking through grand galleries or recognizing shapes emerging from Caravaggio's chiaroscuro, or being a bit overwhelmed by the swirling robes and bodies in Rubens' paintings. But you need to remember these differences and then look for these different manifestations of style in arts and in architecture. And then I think far more appreciation of Baroque might come through. So let me show you what I mean here. Now, if you look carefully at this photo, think about which part of this cathedral complex do you most wonder about? My guess is this peculiar roof in the background, which is actually hiding the dome of one of the most original structures in European classical architecture, the Chapel of the Holy Shroud, which was commissioned by the Savoys and designed and built by Guarino Guarini. Because the front of the cathedral is Renaissance. You see what I mean? It is kind of there, it is clear, it is visible, it's frozen in time, it's not going anywhere. You don't marvel at it, you just see it. When you look at the Guarini's roof there, you are wondering what is going on in there. It does look a bit, well, spectacular, interesting, original. You know, it provides all of the details that the Baroque requires from the artist. Now, the shroud was a Savoy's possession. The earliest records that we have of it is from 1354, and at that time it was held in a church in Léry, which was halfway between Dijon and Paris. We don't know how it got there, really. The Savoys acquired it in mid-15th century, and then they kept it in a chapel in Chambéry until 1578, and at that point they brought it to their new capital, Turin. And it was first shown in this royal church of San Lorenzo, which was also built by Guarino Guarini, replacing an older, smaller church. It's an interesting story about it, because San Lorenzo is actually a sibling building of the great royal monastery and palace of Escorial in Spain, because, again, another Savoy, Emanuele Filiberto, led Spanish troops to victory in a decisive battle in the Italian wars in 1557, which really sealed the French fate. And the battle was actually fought in the northern France at Saint-Quentin. I know if you're feeling confused, I know Italian wars are very confusing. They were fought all over the place, but yet always referred to as Italian wars. So now this battle was won on the feast day of St. Lawrence, and Emanuele Filiberto and Philip II, the Habsburg King of Spain, both vowed to build votive churches dedicated to St. Lawrence. Now, Philip obviously had all the gold and silver of South America, so he built the massive El Escorial, but the Savoys had Guarino Guarini, who built this unique gem of Baroque architecture, which may not be much to marvel at from the outside, but it is absolutely breathtaking when you walk in. You need to actually spend some time in there so that your 21st century eyes can adjust to this visual extravaganza that delivers all the concetto, meraviglia, and spectacle anyone can ever wish for. But it is not just a mere pileup of religious decorative motifs. Guarini was a priest and a teacher and a writer and a mathematician. And nothing in his concepts is incidental, derivative from others, or purely decorative. Every detail of this interior relates to another in a complex sort of interplay And it's enlivened by the dramatic use of light and shadows. And we don't have time now, but we will be discussing it all in situ in September. Now, for me personally, the most marvelous sights in Turin are Guarini's domes, and this is the one crowning this church of San Lorenzo. There's nothing like it anywhere else in Europe. Here, he plays with a fluid plan full of religious symbolism as he builds his space towards the dome. So right there at the floor level, he starts with the square, and then slowly the space becomes octagonal above the columns. Then it turns into a Greek cross at the level of the pendatives that we can see here. And then these lead to the circular base of the dome you're looking at. And then all it's crowned with another octagonal lantern. So you have our cube world and the sphere heaven above it, divided by the cross, and with the number 8 repeating itself to remind us that all was created in 7 days and will be judged on the 8th day. So the whole church is spectacular. It is not just visually, but also just as a concept, as a iconology. And then you look up and you see this incredible dome carried by 8 ribs that form this lattice, which is reminiscent of the Moorish medieval Spain. It's absolutely extraordinary in its engineering and aesthetics. And Guarini was also the final architect of that chapel of the Holy Shroud we started with there. The Savoys commissioned it already in 1611 as a connection between the existing cathedral that you saw and the newly built royal palace. So the idea was that the pilgrims would enter and exit through the cathedral, and the Savoys would get their own private access both to the cathedral and to the shroud from the top. But the architects responsible for the project could not really deliver the magnificent space the Savoys were demanding. They could not work out the maths required to raise the height of the chapel so that it doesn't appear like a strange squat attic space behind the main altar of the cathedral. Because when you are in a cathedral, you can look up above the altar and see straight into this chapel. So Guarini was invited to take over the success of San Lorenzo, and needless to say, he did deliver. He reinforced the already built walls and then added this middle part that you can see here, this particular part with the arches, and then completely redesigned the dome that is rising above. And then again, he insisted on this monochrome effect, completely different from San Lorenzo, and created a deeply meaningful iconology for the whole space. The shroud was placed in this altar that you can see in the middle, and it was kept there until the Great Fire in April of 1997, which was caused by the electrical fault. The shroud was saved and is now kept in a specially designed box, and this box can be seen in the cathedral, but it's not open, so you can't see the shroud. But the chapel was nearly destroyed, and the restoration and reconstruction took 28 years. So now it's in its full glory again. This is it from the outside. It is that wondrous structure that perhaps caught your eye behind the Renaissance cathedral that I showed you a few slides ago. And it is truly a very special place to visit, whether you're religious or not. It's like stepping inside the kaleidoscope of Guarini's mind. I think you can tell by now that Guarini's really is one of my favorites. He also designed secular buildings too, most notably this Palazzo Carignano for the cadet branch of the Savoy family, which is well known for its fabulously playful brick facade. All of this is brick, and it undulates, and it's especially handmade bricks, decorative and so on. And it's also well known as being the birthplace of the first king of Italy, Vittorio Emanuele II, and also as the place of the first parliament of the United Kingdom of Italy in 1861 until it all went south, first to Florence and then Rome. Now, notice how the palace roof is leveled with the roof of the neighboring building here. Now, when you walk around Turin, you can only enjoy the elegance of its urban planning. It's all so thought through. There's this regular grid of streets, a uniform height and proportions of the buildings. So here is a great example, the beloved Piazza San Carlo, and it shows this orderly, classy charm of Turin. And imagine yourself a 17th century visitor from, let's say, Vienna or Paris, which at that time were still shackled to their medieval urban arrangements. And imagine yourself coming to this dazzling place of Baroque order. Nothing was left to chance or developers' greed and vanity, and all thanks to the Savoy regulations. And these were not just for the purposes of good looks, because such organized city was easier to defend from all kinds of enemies, from the plague and fire to the French. And splendid architecture was also the way to show off, both to friends and foes, the knowledge of construction and engineering, which could be translated into military power when required. And Turin is full of spectacular feats of architectural engineering, from Guarini's domes that I've just shown you to all the way to Fiat's headquarters. This is Basilica of Superga, and it is again one such feat. It was built again as a votive church to commemorate the Savoys' victory over the French. Another one in the Battle of Turin in 1706, which was fought as a part of the Spanish Wars of Succession. And the Savoys again were on a winning side, and this actually gave them the crown of Sicily. Vittorio Amadeo II became the king of Sicily, and this was a step that will eventually lead to the throne of the whole of Italy in 1861. The church was designed by Filippo Juvara, a Sicilian, who was the chief architect for the Savoys for many years and who also built royal palaces in Portugal and Spain. It took 14 years to build it, the first of which was spent removing about top 40 meters and flattening the peak so that the foundations could be properly laid. There were no roads leading up the hill, just a steep, dodgy path, and all of the tools and materials had to be transported by donkeys. You have to admire them. Today there is there's an antique a cable, not a cable car, but like a tramway that goes all the way up. So it's a beautiful place to visit. And the church also contains the royal crypt where most of the Savoy rulers since their arrival to Turin are interred. Most recently, actually in 24, when Vittorio Emanuele, which was the only son of the last king of Italy, was buried there. So it is a place of pilgrimage for many Italians who come in droves to pay respect or just to enjoy spectacular views, especially at sunset. I have to be honest and say that the mountain size here is superimposed. You do see these mountains, but they do appear much smaller than because they are in quite a distance, the Alps. Juvara was also responsible for the renovation and extension of the old hunting lodge in the village of Venaria, which was greatly damaged again by the French in this particular conflict. And there he created this great gallery, which is a place that once again really sums up this concept marvel and spectacle motto. It is a masterpiece of architectural engineering of the early 18th century, and also the most spectacular space of this vast palatial complex that is often referred to as the Versailles of Italy. The gallery is 15 meters high, 80 meters long, and 12 meters wide, and it has glorious views of the Alps. So it definitely beats the long gallery of the Fontainebleau Palace, and with this natural light, even the Versailles Hall of Mirrors. I feel like Juvara wanted to sort of stick two fingers up to the French with this particular project. Venaria is one of 6 fabulous royal residences that form the so-called crown of delights around Turin, because the Savoys spent winter months in the royal palace in the center of Turin, but the rest of the year they were moving around these 6 other palaces. This was important to project the royal splendor, show of wealth, but these palaces very often served some other purposes. So here at Venaria, they've opened a military school for cavalry officers, which was in its time the most prestigious one in Europe, and most national armies send their officers for finishing in Venaria. It is a very, very interesting place. And after Napoleon's conquest, it sort of deteriorated. The Savoys just left it to the military to use it, and it was like that until the First World War, after which it was completely abandoned. So it was only 25 years ago that the funds were raised and the whole place was restored. And this is to this day considered the largest ever restoration project in Europe. It is now open to public again. It is one of the most visited Italian monuments after Rome by Italians themselves. And it is dedicated to the history of the Savoy dynasty. So it's definitely the place to visit if you want to learn and understand the Savoys, as we will be doing in September. Now, I keep mentioning how war savvy were the Savoys, and it's precisely this attitude of being always ready that it is an essential part of the Torinese culture. They didn't just keep one of the largest standing armies per capita in Europe. They also actively invested and maintained a huge war industry. The weapons produced in Piedmont were always of the highest quality and innovation, highly praised across Europe, which meant that in Torino, for centuries, you had a constant and great concentration of all kinds of knowledge: mining, metallurgy, casting, construction, all under the patronage and encouragement of the state. And consecutive generations of the Savoy rulers were not just great military leaders, but they were also armory collectors, and their collection has been on public view since the 19th century. We will visit it as a part of the Royal Palace guided tour, but I will make sure that we get some free time in there too, as it is the most dazzling display of metalwork I've ever seen. I'm normally not really interested in swords, but here I can lose myself for hours, because the craftsmanship, the techniques, the materials that you can see here, it is as any art gallery that I have ever visited. The Savoys were actually great collectors of all sorts of things, and also they were great believers in allowing the public access to culture. So if you think that the 19th century was really complex and turbulent period in Italian history, you really have to admire both the Savoy and the Torino city and its leaders as such, when amongst all this kerfuffle of wars for unification and political intrigue, they still managed to open 3 public museums and this gallery as well. The Savoys were avid collectors of Egyptian artifacts since the 16th century, when a plaque with a dedication to Isis was accidentally excavated during a construction works of on a military tower, and this eventually led to the assembly of a great body of research, as well as the artifacts, and this is considered the most impressive and extensive collection of Egyptian antiquities outside Egypt. And having been to both British Museum and Torino's Museo Egizio, I would I'd say that Turin beats London without any competition, really. They also, during the 19th century, opened their own royal art collection, Galleria Sabauda, to the public viewing. And actually, in 1860, they donated it to the state completely. So just consider that act of graciousness in comparison to the other. And in 1863, which is an interesting point as well, Torino opened the first contemporary art collection in Europe. They've opened the Civic Gallery of Modern Art because they realized that art is ongoing thing. It happens all the times, and as a community, as a society, they also have a duty to support it and collect it and to display it. And this was the first contemporary art display anywhere in Europe. And they also built this really peculiar building, I have to say, Mole Antonelliana. It was supposed to be a 47-meter tall synagogue, but it ended up being a 167-meter high symbol of Turin. The Jewish community commissioned it, but then pulled out of the project because of the rising costs. And then the city of Turin decided to take over. They gifted another plot of land, and a synagogue was built there. But they supported the engineer in his wildly ambitious ideas, and Mole opened. It was dedicated to the king, newly minted king Vittorio Emanuele. It served as an exhibition hall and so on, and today is the home of the splendid National Museum of the Cinema. Now, again, if we think about the 19th century and all the turbulence and so on, we eventually get to, obviously, Fiat. When Turin lost to Rome in the race of who's going to be the capital city of the Kingdom of Italy, the Savoys had to leave. They did it with a heavy heart, but they had to. And Torino lost some pomp and circumstance, but it did not take long for it to recover completely and throw itself into new pursuit, which was the Industrial Revolution. Of course, it was very easy because there was already an existing industry and the knowledge and the spirit of cooperation that was cultivated for centuries. So it's not a surprise that Turin was the leading city of this Italian Industrial Revolution, especially when it came to the car industry. The city was full of engineers and metal workers, and the upper classes had centuries of practice in project initiation and management. So all was geared to serve up the city and the state. So when we look at Fiat, we usually think of Giovanni Agnelli, but actually it was a committee of 9 upper class people that got together and founded Fiat in 1899. This was the very first car they produced, but it was in the end Giovanni Agnelli that took over and managed it to its greatness, using the technology and the knowledge that he gathered from the Ford plants in the USA. So they knew where to go, they knew they had to research, they knew they had to study, and then apply themselves. He built the famous Lingotto complex in the 1920s, which is still a symbol of Turin's industrial boom. And perhaps the only thing that people today think of when Turin is mentioned, unfortunately. Lingotto was not just a Fiat factory, this large structure that you see here, and the head office. You can see around it there was a whole residential quarters and a town infrastructure that was built to accommodate the Fiat workers, just the way that the Savoy used to do it in the past for the various artisans and businesses that they needed to support their war industry and so on. So Fiat came very much as a result of this culture that the Savoys have initiated and supported for centuries. Throughout the 20th century, with the huge influx of labor to keep the factories going, it became known for mostly social unrest. It was said that the Turin was the third most populous southern city after Naples and Palermo, because in a first 25 years after the Second World War, 500,000 people came from the impoverished south. But throughout all this, throughout the 20th century, Torino kept its old community atmosphere, this Savoy atmosphere. Now shifting perhaps to the left from the old Risorgimento unification spirit, because when we look at the history of 20th century in Italy, we realize that the Turin was the cradle of anti-fascism movement, for example. It was where the liberal academia blossomed, and also all of the Italian labor movements. Like most of Italy, it experienced an extremely turbulent period in the late 1960s and the whole of 1970s, which is also, I think, what contributes today to the somewhat negative contemporary image of Turin's outside Italy, because people remember that those were perhaps a bit dark times. And then on top of that, you just think Fiat. But Turin is so much more than all of this talk of industria, and even of the talk of Savoys. You know, it is a place where a magic combo of hazelnuts and chocolate was invented, which eventually led to Nutella. And the place where the culture of apero, of having an aperitif and a bit of a gossip, was also instituted and spread across Italy and actually Europe. It is a place that worshipped chocolate first, perhaps, of all of them, because we know that the chocolatiers from the Savoy court were dispatched to France, to Belgium, and to Switzerland to teach them over there how to make chocolate. So I hope I have managed to lift the curtain on Turin's glorious Savoy past and introduce it to you as a royal city with a very distinct culture, which kept evolving with times for half a millennium. It is only in the recent years that the city powers are starting to develop tourism initiatives. So it's only a matter of time before the rest of the world catches up. So I urge you, come and join me in September or visit on your own before the masses arrive. Thank you for listening. Let's hear your questions and answers.
Oh, hi. Can everyone hear me? Nirvana, thank you for that. We've had a few questions, quite a few questions. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
No, okay. I'm going to paraphrase a few of them, but here's one of them. How did the Italy of Piedmont in the 16th century relate to modern Italy? You've probably answered that, but maybe there's a clarification there.
I hope I did. This culture of relative egalitarianism and working together and investing into the industries that help us thrive, that help us be to a certain extent self-sufficient and thrive. This is what eventually led Turin, when it was no longer the capital, when the court moved, when the various political turbulences happened, Turin just kept going because it had developed already this industrial spirit, this spirit of cooperation, of appreciation for education, which is not something you find among the upper classes, of Europe, all the way up maybe until 20th century, or if not even now. So everything that Savoy developed from their arrival in the late 16th century, it just pushed Turin and separated it really, I feel, culturally from the rest of Italy, and created this particular culture still alive today. Today, Turin is very focus on becoming a eco-city, self-sustainability again, and so on. There's much more talk about it there than anywhere else in Italy. And when you visit there, you see in action that they're actually doing many things about it, from the way that they run the public transport not using petrol and so on. It's a special culture, and the seed of that culture was planted in 16th century.
Yeah, no, I think we're getting the idea that Turin is a little bit separate from the rest of India,
Very much so.
Italy. And I just wondered, we had another question. What was Turin's role in the development of the great Piedmont wines and their resounding success on the world stage? A tricky one.
Well, yeah, certainly the Barolo and Barbaresco are considered top Italian wines, in the same way that when you look at the French wines, then it's common to say that the Burgundian wines are the top of the French production. Whether that's true or not, whether that's a question of superb marketing from the Dukes of Burgundy up until now, that's a different topic. We can discuss that elsewhere, hopefully with a glass of wine. But because of the origins in the region of Savoy, which was, from the medieval time onwards, was always strongly connected with the Burgundy. When you look at the way that Piedmont makes its wine, it's always single varietal, bottled on its own. So it's very much the way that the Burgundians make their Burgundy, based on Pinot Noir. Here you have Nebbiolo and so on. So I would say that there is that connection, where in the other parts of Italy, there's far more willingness to do blends, like for example Chianti. In Piedmont, the top wines are nurtured as a singular varietal, similarly to Burgundy. And this is also the way that the wines are still produced in the Savoy. People don't know enough about the wines of Savoy. There isn't a great production. I live in a region of Savoy, but it is the singular varietal, and sort of working with that one plant and getting that grape to do the best for you. So that is perhaps the connection that the Savoy and the Turin has on the production of the Piedmont wine.
Okay, sticking with that theme, I'm not sure did Savoy permanently lose French savoir during the Revolution, or was it restored after 1815?
Oh, I like to show maps when I lecture. I love maps, but the history was so turbulent that the lands were going backwards, forwards, here, there, and so on. So the Savoy was restored to them after the fall of Napoleon, but in the 1860s, when you have a formation of the Kingdom of Italy, Savoy and the part of the Côte d'Azur with Nice, which was also part of the lands of the Savoy, they had a referendum and they voted to join France, which I'm sure hurt, but such is life. So that is when they finally lost the Savoy. When they formed Italy, when Italy was united, that was the final sort of straw. Before that, you had this push and pull with the French for a very long time. And incidentally, I mean, there's a suburb in Geneva that was part of the Savoy lands up until also 1860, and it does look similar to Torino rather than the rest of Geneva.
Okay, I mean, slightly related to that, but how integrated was the Savoy economy, mobility, culture, populations with etc.? Normally, you associate mountain languages.
Sorry,
That's
with?
Well, I'm apologies. I'm just make how integrated was the Savoy economy, mobility of culture, population you associate with mountain languages? Does that question? No.
What language? I don't understand this
Yeah, no,
word
maybe
before you
I'm.
say languages. So the Savoys actually understood that in order to keep everybody happy, they have to give them a certain level of autonomy. So when you look at the Savoy lands, for example, if you go to the Aosta, they have Aostan language, which yeah, I can't understand. I can understand Italian, but I can't understand Aostan. And when you go in Aosta, they speak Aostan, French, and Italian. And the Savoys were very much relaxed about it, and they realized, you have this massive Alps between us. We can't be all the same, especially because they came from Savoy into Piedmont, and they understood these differences. So there was never any enforcement, and especially in the areas that were logistically crucial for them, that were very very important, like the Aosta Valley. They even gave a certain level of governance autonomy. So that is the reason why even today Aosta Valley is like an autonomous part of Italy. It has its own parliament and runs itself by itself, and it's a Savoy legacy. So the Savoys were in one way they were hands-on rulers with the laws that enforced community spirit and relative equality, which would then feed in a positive way back into the overall state. But they understood the need of different people to have their own autonomous things. So the Savoy have a culture that is somewhat different from the people from the Piedmont, but everybody seemed to have been fine with it. And
Okay,
and
we've had a few
traveling
questions.
through Savoy, I have chatted with the older people and so on, who who are still to this day quite bitter about Paris enforcing the Parisian French on them. And they
Right. Okay.
said that the referendum of 1860s would have gone differently if they knew that the Parisian French will be forced onto them.
I mean, I'm not. I've had a question here. I thought the Savoy became connected with Sardinia, not Sicily.
Yes, yes, this is what I wanted to avoid all of this. This was all part of. If you look at the list of titles that the Savoys held through history, from like 15th century up until I think now, I think they still own these titles. They were also kings of Armenia, Jerusalem, and Cyprus. So they became the kings of Sicily through another war between mostly Spain and France. They gained Sardinia, but they lost Sicily, and then from being kings of Sardinia, they became kings of Italy.
Now, this is a very technical question, so you'll have to forgive my pronunciation. But how does Guiani compare with Brunel Ishesh? Does that? No, maybe that's me. Sorry. No. How does Guiani? No, no. My apologies. That might be my pronunciation. No, I think that's Nirvana. I'm just going through the question. Can you see the questions as they come up?
No, I'm sorry. No.
I've got ranges, not languages, as another question. Does that make any sense to you?
Ranges.
Ranges, not questions.
No, sorry.
No? Okay. Well, I've had another question. What is the itinerary for September? I'm looking forward to Serbia. Absolutely. Please contact us for more details. Nirvana, I'm very conscious of time. You thank you very much for a wonderful introduction and clarification of where Turin and Italy and the House of Savoy sits in the history of things. Thank you very much. I think we'll sign off now, and that's been a wonderful lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.